Hello, everybody, and welcome back to PPG. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Zan Tyler, who is an amazing singer-songwriter. She has a new album coming out, I think, next year. Is that right, Zan?
Yep, early next year.
Next year. It's called Holding Up Half the Sky. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Zan, welcome. It is so good to see you here on Goldster. Thank you so much for coming along.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So tell us, we haven't had a singer on here before, so tell us, how did you get started in the music industry?
Um, I sort of fell into it really. I left school quite young and was sort of working in a restaurant and kind of not entirely sure what I was going to be doing with my life. I always enjoyed singing, but I wasn't massively confident and didn't really do it in front of other people. And an opportunity came up, and it was one of those things where you think, okay, this is the most terrifying thing I could possibly do, but I know if I don't do it, I'll regret it. And I jumped in and did it, and I did actually think I might die of nerves. I was that nervous. It was my first gig was at the Rock Garden in Covent Garden.
Wow, that is an incredible first gig to get.
It was a bit of a jump in with both feet, I must say. And we were a band of, I think there was 18 people
Wow.
in the band. Death Bang Party. I was a backing singer and dancer, and the stage was tiny. We could fit about 5 people on stage, so lots of the band was sort of around the stage and spilling. It was just kind of bedlam, crazy, immense fun, and I just kind of got the bug, and that was it really. Once I got that bug, I didn't really want to stop, and did a lot more stuff with that band, and then went on to join loads of other bands after that. So it was one of those weird, just sort of happened things.
And I remember seeing you perform in Death Bang Party. That's how I first knew you. And I just never would have known that you were nervous ever. Do you still get that stage fright?
Yeah. I
Doesn't
do.
necessarily.
I get nervous. I mean, it depends how much I'm doing though. Like if I'm doing lots of gigs, obviously it gets better. At the moment, I'm quite nervous about gigs because I haven't been doing a lot of them. There's a couple a year. So I've been recording a lot and just concentrating on writing and recording. So yeah, I am a bit.
So you grew up in London, you used to perform in London, and now you're living in Scotland. And I know with the pandemic and everything just stopped. Do you feel that getting back into it now, it's such a different life from what you had before? Does that add to the nerves, do you think?
Yeah, things have changed for sure. I mean, I wasn't gigging tons even before, so that like lots of my friends and stuff were solely reliant on touring, and it just all stopped. Huge tours just cancelled overnight, and so devastating for lots of people. I wasn't in that position, but I did have a bunch of. In fact, it was actually about to be my busy summer that year, so
Mhm.
sensible. So I did cancel a lot of stuff. But I mean, it did bring up some positive stuff in that I had never done much of this kind of thing, and that felt really scary. And now I'm doing it. And
Well
I
done.
start, thank you. I started with a Boo Hewardine, who produced my album actually, and a guy called Finley Napier. They run a lot of songwriting retreats and workshops and stuff. And they offered a thing for artists adversely affected by COVID, a sort of week-long songwriting retreat online. And they offered that, and it was funded. So nobody had to pay. And it was an amazing opportunity. It was really great. And it was lovely environment and met lots of cool people. And so that was my first sort of jump into doing this kind of online thing. It was also my first kind of jump into doing proper sort of co-writing as well, which I was always terrified of too. So I
Oh,
would
tell us about that. What's that process like?
online, you
Yeah.
mean? It's different. It's really, really different. And it varies because I've done it now with quite a few different people. So it really varies from person to person. Um, with uh, you know, for example, I've done a bit of writing with Boo, and he's written thousands of songs, and with thousands of people. So he's very sort of very, very good at it, and very quick, and very puts you at ease very quickly. And So, you know, I would come in, for example, on this album, he wrote some of the songs with me. So that was a really nice experience. And I would come in with an idea and I'd have researched it a lot. And, you know, we'll probably talk about some of those songs specifically. But I would have, you know, come in with quite a lot of lyrics that I wanted to use. Sometimes I'd have a melody, sometimes I wouldn't, sometimes, so it would really, really vary. And he would just sort of pick up his guitar and sort of be like, well, how about this? And I'd be like, no, not, you know. So it was just really, really different. And if you're in the same room, I don't know, somehow you just get right on with it when you're doing it online. Whereas somehow when you're in the same room, there's a bit more procrastination. Maybe I mean, being in the same room terrified me just as much, don't get me wrong. So
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons I did that online course, because I wanted to get less afraid of working with other people. And it really varies. Like I say, sometimes it can be that you've pretty much written the whole song yourself, and that other person might contribute one line or one chord change suggestion or one bridge, and that's the thing that makes the song, you know. So it's like it's got to be a really 50-50 process, you know, regardless of how much each individual person does, if you know what I mean. It's still a 50-50 process, because any contribution is important, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So it was great. I learned a lot doing that, and I met some cool people. That course was really good. It was really good. So that was the sort of lockdown experience that I saw as really positive. And also I started writing with another guy who's based in Amsterdam, and we've now actually got almost an album together. So
Fantastic.
that
Well,
all started during lockdown.
that is what's been amazing about online work, isn't it? This collaboration with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And that must have opened up lots of new possibilities. Is that an exciting thing to think you could work with people from anywhere without having to fly out somewhere?
Yeah, it really does. It really is, and it really has. And the other side of it for me was that I'm not especially technical. Like I've got music software, I've got a decent microphone and things, and I have a space to do it in. But I've always been a bit intimidated by that side of things. So again, needs must, isn't it? You just got to go, right now, you just got to do this. You've got no choice, you know. So it's given me a kick up the bum to be a bit better at that stuff too. So it does mean that I can do a vocal for somebody in America and just send it to them, and I don't ever have to actually physically meet them, and we can collaborate. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I remember recently being contacted by someone on Radio 4 who wanted me to record, just obviously not singing, to record a piece for them. And I literally recorded it in my phone and WhatsApped it to them, and then it was on their program. And I thought, that is extraordinary, how
Yeah.
everything has changed in the last couple of years of how people want you to provide content for things. It's amazing. It's opened up so many kind of new avenues as well.
Absolutely. And for me and lots of other musicians and other creatives in general, actually, you know, it is hard to earn a living. And if you're able and willing to embrace the sort of online opportunities, it does open up stuff. So for example, I'm just sort of dipping my toe in the water a wee bit with this, but Patreon being a platform that's, you know, really, really useful for people like me who can sort of just do content in their own time at home, you know, record a live song, or, you know, just anything I want to do really. And then people sign up, and so they pay a small amount each month, and that slowly but surely will build and hopefully become more of an income. And there's people doing that in all sorts of artistic fields, you know, illustrators, painters, musicians. So yeah, it's great, isn't it? We've got
Yeah.
that, you know, it certainly helps, because lots of other areas are closing in terms of revenue, you know.
Yeah.
Musicians, particularly with streaming, and you know, you're kind of giving your music away, really, aren't you? You have to.
Well, I always think that with things like Spotify, I mean, what is the deal with artists? I mean, do they love it? Do they hate it?
It's both. It's a lovely thing. You've
Yeah.
got to be on there. You've got no choice. You know, you've got to be on there. But it doesn't pay fairly. It's as simple as that. It's I don't know what it is. It's something like 0.0 0.63 pence per play. I mean, I can't remember what it was, but it was ridiculous. It's not
Yeah.
even a pence a play. So you can have a hit on Spotify that streams millions of times, and you see very little
Wow.
from that, and that's not very fair.
No.
Well, people are paying their subscription fees. They're paying, what is it, 16 quid to have an account without adverts anyway. You can obviously access it free.
So things are getting harder, do you reckon, for musicians in terms of trying to make a living from what you do?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, streaming nowadays, so obviously touring got really hit, and that was hard, and people now everybody's doing the tours that were cancelled for COVID, and they're
Yes.
all doing them at the same time. So like you look at what's on in Glasgow. Why on earth are those three people playing on the same night in Glasgow? Because they're all in the same kind of career level, if you like. They're in the same genre, but they've got to get back out there, and these are the venues that are available to them. So that's difficult. Then I guess people they sell their merchandise and things at gigs, but lots of venues are now struggling, so they're trying to take a slice of people's merchandise. So there's quite a few venues that expect you to give them, I don't know what the percentages are because it's not happened to me, but I've heard
Yeah.
that going on. So that's a bit, I get that venues are struggling, but it's like everywhere you look, the musicians getting a slice taken off them. So I do think it's harder. And I guess there are other ways. There's the whole TikTok thing, and it's all about content and stuff, which I get
Takes the time to create.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with all these things, like saying Patreon, TikTok, whatever. You've got to give your time, not knowing if you're going to get anything back for it, and take time away from your performing, from your writing.
Exactly.
Tough one.
It is a really tough one.
So let's go back to your songwriting. Have you always written your own songs, or is this something you started doing later, or is it something you used to do when you were little?
I haven't always. Well, I have always, but I didn't always share them, if you know what I mean. Even when I was working as a singer, and my early days, I was singing other people's songs, and I was just lacking in confidence to the point of ridiculous, and didn't think that I could do it, or didn't think what I was doing was good enough, or lots of different reasons. And so it was something that I kind of took that leap of faith a bit later on, really. And I'd done a lot of stuff by the time I started writing my own songs. Yeah.
We've got a comment in the chat here saying, I really missed live music during lockdown. Monique, I think I really did. And I think that there's so many people out there who are thrilled to get all the live music back again. But I wonder how many people are still not going out, though. I think when I've been to the theatre, sometimes I'm stunned by how few people are there. Are you noticing that, Zan? Do you find that you're going to gigs and there's just not that many people there compared to before?
I'm not sure I've noticed it at the actual gigs that I've attended, but I've heard from friends that gigs have been cancelled due to lack of ticket sales, and they're putting that down to people still being very cautious. I think also COVID is still getting used as an excuse for things sometimes. So when things haven't done well, they'll cancel it for other, like venues, for example, might cancel something that's been poorly advertised and hasn't sold much, and then they're like, oh, COVID, So yeah, people are still getting a lot of stuff cancelled, and not as well attended as they used to be, and it's still really difficult. Yeah,
I found with live events that with literary festival events, people won't buy tickets in advance. So everyone I've done 4 recently where they've all said the same thing. We didn't think we'd sold any tickets, and then on the day or the day before, suddenly all the tickets go. They sell well over half of the tickets on the day itself, and that's just not what it used to be like before. But you've got to have the confidence then to still run the event, just in hope that people will turn up.
That's right. And I think because the venues are struggling, they're not wanting to, have that, go ahead with the event. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that it's across the board with literary stuff as well then. Yeah,
so you've been working on your first solo album, and you've done lots of other work before. So tell us about it. Holding Up Half the Sky. Love that title. That's fantastic. Tell us about it and what inspired you, and tell us about some of the songs.
So yeah, it's my first solo album, although I have, as you say, released other albums. Those have been more collaborative albums and under sort of other titles and so forth. So this will be the first album under my own name. I was very fortunate to get funding for this from Creative Scotland and also Help Musicians. It just would not have happened without them. So that's been really amazing. And the support they've given me sort of since has been incredible. But the album, I wanted, so sort of going back before this album, I wrote a song a few years ago called Vicky, which is about that sort of self-sabotaging inner critic that we all have. And that's that voice in the head that tells you you're not good enough and so on. The same voice that probably held me back from, you know, writing those songs years ago, and, you know, maybe could have stopped me even getting on that stage in the first place, you know. So it was about her, this song, and so I gave her the name Vicky. And I was gigging, the song itself ended up as part of a collaborative project that I did called Let It Come Down. So it's out there if you want to find it. But the song itself I would do at gigs and things, and it seemed to really connect with people. And I'd get people coming up afterwards going, God, I've so got a Vicky. I really get that, you know, and somehow giving her a name and writing this song was kind of quite empowering and helped me to sort of conquer her a wee bit, but also whilst acknowledging that she has her uses, particularly.
And what are those uses?
Well, I think you know, as a writer, you know, self-doubt, and it takes you to places to explore, and so those are the uses. And I think I wouldn't want to get rid of her completely, but yeah, so that's where that was on 2 albums ago, Let It Come Down, and I did an album in between which came out during lockdown, and then I had this idea that I wanted to do this new album. So it was exploring that whole idea, you know, of the sort of the voices that hold you back, but also I was kind of thinking about why so many women I know particularly seem to sort of suffer with this self-doubt and this kind of, I mean, it's not exclusively women, I know, but I did notice amongst my female friends it was a large proportion of them seem to struggle with this, and it just got me thinking about how I wanted to write something about women and for women. And so I started out with songs about myself and about self-doubt and about all sorts of different things, and then I started exploring songs. I started writing songs about women that interested me, inspiring women. So funnily enough, actually, one of your books was involved.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
because
Which one?
Lizzie Sadao was
What's fantastic.
one
I
of
did
the.
not pay her to say this, by the way. This is
No,
great.
you don't know this. I know you don't. So because so yeah, she just fascinated me because obviously she was famous for being the muse, but you know, she was so much more than that, you know, and the poetry that she wrote was, you know, I found that really wonderful and inspiring. And you know, their story is bonkers, isn't it? You know, with the letters.
This mad love story that's crazy, and no one wants to be a part of. You don't want a love story like that.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I just, you know, for each song I did research and I went to different places, and I knew you had that book, so I was like, I'm going to read that book, which is a great book, by the way.
Thank you. I'm just going to give it a name check here. It's called Lizzie Siddle, The Tragedy of a Pre-Raphaelite Supermodel, just to get that out there. Thanks for that.
Get that out there. It's a great book. So yeah, she was actually the first one that I wrote about. And she's not, and that song hasn't made the cut. It's not on the album, not because of the subject matter, but it was just a little bit too much like another song. So I decided we'll park that one. It will get used at some point, but just not on.
That's so fascinating to me. So when I've never obviously written an album. When you're writing an album, do you write a large number of songs and then decide which ones are going to go in? I just assumed you would get to a certain number and that would be it, but that's not the case at all. You you overwork, as it were. You come up with all sorts of things.
Did on this one for sure. And
Brilliant.
I think that's probably how I will be doing it moving forward. Again, you know, it felt really good to have lots and lots of stuff, even though I knew as we were going along. I did a lot of work with Boo, who's absolutely amazing. He totally got behind the whole concept of the album and what I wanted to achieve. So even though there was points where I knew I was possibly repeating myself in terms of subject matter, so muses, for example, were one of the themes that I got quite into. So yeah, that's fine. Like, just keep going, you know, just keep writing, even if you are covering some stuff that you've already covered, you'll find new stuff. So I think probably had about 30 songs. 25, I can't actually
And
remember.
how
Yeah,
many have you got on the final album?
well, on the album.
Yeah.
So,
You've got
and nothing
two
goes to
albums
waste.
basically.
Sorry.
You've written 2 albums basically. You could just
Yeah,
bring another one.
yeah, nothing goes to waste. You know, you'll use, even if you don't use, you know, something that you haven't used, even if you don't, that doesn't end up being a whole song. You'll use bits of it. You know, something from it will be useful. So it's all good stuff. So yeah, tons more material than I needed, and actually ended up in a really lovely position of having, I didn't set out to write radio songs or hits or singles or any of that thing, just write and you see what comes, but have sort of ended up with having more kind of singles. So it's actually, you know, a really nice position to be in when you go, right, what are the singles going to be? Oh, actually, we've got quite a lot of choice here. You know, there's, you know, in fact, still haven't totally decided on the second single. So that was really nice. Yeah.
So you're going to release the singles before, at least release a couple of the singles before the album comes out. Is that right?
3 singles this year. Yeah. So I'm very lucky to have been signed to a really great label in Glasgow called Last Night from Glasgow. Check them out. They're a brilliant label. They're a sort of not-for-profit type label, and they're all about as much of the income going back to the artist, which
Brilliant. That's so good.
Yeah, really great label. It feels like a family. It feels really, really right already. So that's cool. And we will be releasing the first one in May, second one probably September, and then the third one will be New Year, and then the album will be early March, and it will be around about the time of sort of International Women's Day. I wanted, because of the strong sort of female empowerment theme, I wanted it to sort of come out around about then. So
I
yeah.
will tell everybody how they can listen to that. So for those of you who are listening on the podcast, and I've put this in the chat for everyone who's live today, you'll be able to find out more about this on Zan's website, and that's zantyler.com, which is XANTYLER.com. So do check back with her website and see when those singles come out and how you can listen to them. So you've talked about this album is about female empowerment. So you've been in the music industry, no one watching this is going to believe it, but over 20 years. And what has it been like as a woman in the music industry? Is it as sexist as we get the idea that it is? What's it like from the inside?
It's got a long way to go, really, still, I would say. I mean, my first experience of sexism probably came in my early 20s when I was singing in some cover bands. I was singing in quite a busy band, you know, did lots of gigs, and I discovered it was a sort of soul-y band, and I was a backing vocalist, and I discovered that I was getting paid less than everybody else in the band, and they were all, I was the only female in the band.
Wow.
And I was, you know, I was a bit scared to sort of confront them about it, but when I did, I was sort of told, well, you know, you do backing vocals and you're not actually on every song, so, you know, you get paid a bit less. It's like, okay, but the horn section don't play on everything. The male horn section don't play on everything, and they're not getting paid less, they're getting paid the same. So it was just a real eye-opener. It was just like, wow.
Did they resolve it? Did they pay you the same, or did it just carry on that you had to put up with it?
I did get the same in the end. Yeah.
Good for you. So that's a hard thing to do in your 20s.
Yeah, and you know, and this is it. The Vicky in me would have had me just stay quiet, and so there was a bit of me that was like, oh, I'd just be grateful to be here at all and things like that, you know. Whereas now, I don't think anyone would dare pay me a bit less than the males in the band or whatever. But so yeah, that kind of thing. But you know, like, gosh, this year during what's it, Women's History Month of March, you know, Glastonbury announced their lineup, and of all the headliners, how many are female?
Are there
Zero.
any? There's none.
There's no female headliners at Glastonbury 2023. It's like,
That's absolutely insane, Zan. That's
yeah, it's insane. So, you know, it's still got a long way to go. I think it's 25% of artists signed to major labels are female. That's pretty pathetic still.
and do they get this, even those who are signed, do they get as much kind of publicity and marketing as the male bands, do you think, or do you think there's still a disparity there?
I think there probably is still a disparity. It's not something I've looked into specifically, but I would say that those women have to work twice as hard. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And PRS, I think there's 17% of songwriters registered with PRS are female.
Can you explain to everyone who PRS are?
Oh, sorry, the Performing Rights Society. So when you write a song, you have to register that with PRS in order to get your royalties. And if you don't register with that, you don't get your royalties. So that, you know, there's work to be done. It's still pretty poor. I mean, I think less than 3% of producers are female. There's, you know, that area is pretty bad.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. And I think mastering engineers, I think there's only ever been one female Grammy winner that was a mastering engineer, and I don't think there's been that many more producers on Grammys.
Wow. So everybody out there with children and grandchildren who are of an age when they're looking for a career, get them into music production, basically. I think that's
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about role models, isn't it? You know, and I think that unless you see that that's a possibility, you know, young people
yeah.
won't even think that it
And unless
is.
you know someone in that industry, or your parents know someone in that industry, when you're growing up, you don't even realize those jobs exist.
Yeah,
So, that's, you know, I remember growing up, there are many jobs that I now know about and wish I'd known when I was a teenager and to get into, but you know, you just don't know about them. So maybe people need to be more visible, maybe going into schools and talking to them about what they could do. I think there's so much that could be done in careers advice.
there are some really great organisations doing good work in that area. There's what are they called? She Said So is one, and they're a sort of global independent community of women and gender non-conforming people, sort of going around giving talks and connecting and empowering groups, you know, to sort of just it's all about collaboration and creating communities and stuff, isn't it? And I think that that's what these organizations are about. It's about bringing all these artists together, all these you know, different creatives, and just getting out there. And they go to schools and they talk to people across the board. There's one called Pop Girls as well that are doing some great work. There's lots of collectives as well. There's Hen Who's, I don't know if you heard of them. They're a Scottish collective, effectively. I mean, you could almost call them a supergroup. There's lots of big names involved, but they're all writing, producing, mastering, and they got nominated for a Scottish Album of the Year award with their. So there's lots of cool stuff out there, lots of stuff happening, but it's just like, you know, just feels like it's all a bit slow, and you know, still a long way to go, you know.
Yeah, there really is still such a long way to go. Well, let's go back a bit in time to when you were with Technique on Creation Records, which of course most people will know about because of Oasis. Tell us about that time in your life.
It was really good fun. It's my, you know, lasting memory of that time. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a really great opportunity because I was working full time in music, And but I was in lots of different bands, and was working for a music agency as well, so I was booking gigs as well. And then this came up. Trying to remember how it came. Well, actually, the press story was always that we met in the studio. You know how your press department have the story, but it wasn't really what happened. There was an advert in like Melody Maker or somewhere, and a friend of mine saw it and said, "That's you," because it said something like Alan McGee is looking for a Dusty Springfield to front a new project or something. And this friend was like, "That's you. You should go." So I did, and I actually saw the bin bag of cassettes once in their house. For some reason, they still had it, that my cassette came out of. My bin bag full of cassettes. So that was quite,
Fantastic. That's
felt
really
quite good
exciting.
about that. My little cassette had come out of there. And actually, I had a Dusty Springfield cover on the cassette. Like I'd sang Son of a Preacher Man on the demo that got me the gig. So anyway, that was fun, and we released a few singles, and we toured quite a bit. We went to Japan and America, and did lots of stuff in Europe, and did a radio tour, and did some live TV and bits and bobs. So it was a real jump into something completely different for me. Back in those days, they still had budgets for things like videos, so they were spending quite a bit of money on our videos. We did one on a Learjet and one in a sports car driving around Monaco. Yeah, it was like a different world. It was fun. It was really, really fun.
That sounds amazing. So when you say back in those days they had that money, have you found that that's how the music industry's changed? Do people not get given that kind of help now?
Labels haven't got any money either. It hits everybody, obviously. I mean, obviously the majors have, but the independent labels that someone like me would be involved with are struggling too. So now if you get signed to a label, back then you would get an advance. I was on a retainer, which meant that I got paid a monthly wage to be in that band. It was amazing. And then I got gig money and everything else. That doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
Videos don't really happen anymore. I mean, if you're the artist now, you're kind of expected to make your own videos, and you find a way to collaborate with people that are up for creating content for you, or however you want to do it. There's not really much of a budget for that stuff anymore. So yeah, it's very different. Even like photos and things, like lots of labels not paying out for.
Gosh, they don't even pay for your headshots or anything anymore. You've got to cover all that yourself.
Well, I'm not speaking for the label that I'm with, but I've heard lots of people saying that they've had to.
Because on our other Goldster show, Inside Story, we interview lots of authors, and I hear exactly the same thing from authors, that it used to be that your publisher would send around a photographer, you'd get a series of headshots. Now they will ask you to send one in.
Right.
All of those kind of cuts and advances have gone down hugely
Really?
in the last kind of decade or so. So I just wonder where is the money? It's obviously not in the creative industries, is it? It's elsewhere. Yeah. So tell us about your writing process. So when you decide you're going to do something like work on this album, what do you do? What is your kind of daily routine?
Well, with this one, it was quite focused because I had this funding money. So I sort of, in order to get the funding, I had to do a huge amount of project planning. So I did a very detailed budget, and I also had to do a very detailed plan of attack kind of thing, how I was going to do this, and when I was going to write, who I was going to work with, when I was going to record, where I was going to record, and so on and so on. So that was actually a really great process. It was a bit weird because you're doing things like saying, I'm going to spend this much money on a I don't know, banjo, or a session harpist on a song which you haven't even written yet, so it's a little bit strange, but at the same time it does help you to sort of plan the thing. And then obviously I had quite a strong sort of idea of what I wanted it to be about, and then with the women's theme, I'd sort of earmarked a few people I wanted to write about. So I just sat, in this case, I sat and researched, which was really nice. It's not always something you do, I guess, when you write a song. Sometimes you just sit down and write a song about how you feel, or something that's upset you, or something that's made you very happy, or whatever. Whereas with this, it was like, okay, I really want to write about that person. So I sat and did lots of research, with Lizzie, for example. I've got a song on the album called Rebecca's Desk, which is about Rebecca Solnit's desk. Because I'd read this article about how she had been gifted the desk that she writes everything on by somebody who was almost killed by a violent partner. So she'd been brutally attacked by this violent partner, and she then was sort of victim blamed, and he, I don't think, was even prosecuted. She went on to gift this desk to Rebecca, and I love the idea that, he tried to silence her, and then this became the platform for Rebecca's voice.
That's a wonderful story.
So so the whole song is inspired by a desk, but and so I spent a lot of time reading about that, and I've got read lots of articles, and there was one in particular that Rebecca Solnit had written herself. So there's a few words in there that she used in that article, sort of descriptive words and stuff. So,
and is that one of the singles, Rebecca's Desk?
That's my second single that I'm not sure. I think it probably is going to be the second single. Yeah.
So tell us about the first single. What's it called? You said it's coming out in May.
That's May. So the first single is called Miniature Oceans, and it sort of is really just about, it sort of sums up the whole album really, in terms of it being about women's empowerment and women growing, and it's slightly about women aging as well. I'm at a time in my life where I'm thinking about these things, and how we just sort of come together. I've got a guest vocalist on that song, actually. I've got Emma Pollock, who's the lead singer from a band called the Delgados. I'm sure some of your listeners would have heard of. They're quite a big Scottish band.
Yeah.
And she's done a guest vocal on this song. I'm madly in love with her voice, so I was really lucky that she was into the song and said yes.
So have you found, since you've moved to Scotland, that you've really connected with a whole load of new music people? Have you made a lot of new collaborative friendships?
Yeah, I really have. I've found it to be like such a family here. Like, it really is. I know so many people in the music industry in Scotland, and lots of them I've never met in person, but I know them just either online, or just their names are about, and somebody says, blah, and do you know blah. It's it's such a sort of network, and it's I guess because it's small, than like when I was in London, it just never felt like that. And you meet people and they're like, oh, you really need to meet this guy, or you really need to chat to that person, or I'm going to hook you up with blah, and and then people asking you to work on things. I got an email a couple of days ago from somebody doing a collaborative project in Glasgow, and am I interested in doing some vocals? And so yeah, I do. I feel like it's a lovely scene here, really lovely.
So you talked about being from London. Let's talk a little about accents, because before we came on today, we were having a quick chat, and you were saying how people quite often don't want you to sing in your own accent. Tell us about that.
Well, it doesn't happen so much now, but it did when I was doing more sort of sessiony sort of things, particularly dance music. They didn't like it when you sang.
So how did they want you to sing?
Just more of an American accent, don't say dance, say dance, can't even do the accent.
No. But I hear young people, like new artists coming out who've probably just come out of stage school, and you hear them talk and they've got a completely English accent, and then when they sing, they sound like some kind of cod Florida teenager. And that is what the music industry wants then. It's not just that they're deciding to do it, that's what they're being told to do. Is that right?
I think within certain genres, for sure, like in pop, perhaps, and you know, dance music maybe. I think, but I do think that that is maybe one area where things have changed in terms of people just being allowed to just be more who they are and sing with whatever accent they want. You know, there's lots of Scottish artists singing with lovely broad Scottish accents now, you know, so it's, I don't know whether that's still so much of a thing, but I definitely had that when I was younger. Yeah. And I do notice that people will comment on the fact that I sing with my own accent. So I guess it stands out.
That's good. I love a good London accent.
Yeah. Well, I quite often get likened to Lily Allen, but I find that a little bit of a lazy comparison. You know what I mean? Like she's the only one with a London accent.
How many singers have there been with London accents over the centuries? And yeah, Lily Allen's the one you get compared to. And your music is totally different from Lily Allen's.
Well, I have done some reggae, and so it's sort of lovers rocky reggae stuff, and there's some of her stuff has got that slight. So I do kind of get where it can sometimes be a comparison. But yeah, there's plenty of other people singing with their own accents. I mean, I just think just do what feels right, and if it feels right to sing with an American accent, then do it. And I'm never going to judge anybody for what they do. But for me, yeah, it just always feels normal to sing with my own accent. I mean, I've lived in Scotland now for I don't know what it is, 18 years, and people are always saying, how come you haven't got a Scottish accent? And I'm just like, I don't know, how come I have, why would I start speaking with a,
Yeah.
but lots of people do, they and that's just what happens. It's like
Mm.
it's natural to them to start speaking with a Scottish accent or whatever accent when they live somewhere. But for me, no, it was yeah, I just sort of just do what feels right, really. Yeah.
So I've had a question in here. You said you like doing cover versions. Who is your favorite artist to emulate? I think you'd said earlier, didn't you, that you often sang cover versions when you were younger. Do you have somebody favorite? Is it Dusty Springfield? You mentioned before that you'd done a cover of hers, or
Yeah, I love
who would you go
Dusty.
to?
Who else? Gosh. I'm working on a Frazey Ford cover at the moment. Frazey Ford. Yeah, I think Dusty probably would be up there for sure. I think the temptation with covers is to, you know, try and lots of people when they do a cover, they sort of do it like the original, and I try to do something different with it. So, you know, you sort of worry about taking on somebody that's perhaps a bit too soul-y, because I'm not a soul singer. So, you know, for example, you know, I might not go near an Aretha Franklin song, but, you know, actually, why not? You know, just do something completely different with it. So I think anybody's up for grabs. I did on my album with the last album that I released was with Mad Professor, who's a well-known reggae and dub producer, and I was really delighted to get a Townes Van Zandt cover on there, because I mean, Mad Professor had never heard of him, but you know, it's just two completely different worlds. You know, that sort of country songwriter done in a kind of lovers rocky style, and it works really, really well. So I'm up for doing anything really with covers. I like to just play around with them and make them my own. And yeah.
And I saw that your work was described as genre agnostic. I love that. Tell us about that. What does it mean?
Well, I think just the fact that if you look into my, you know, previous releases, you'll see a lot of stuff. And Technique is obviously the first band that I released stuff with, and we used to get called the Pet Shop Girls. It's very sort of electronic female duo. And then, you know, I've done a lot of dance music over the years, and then my sort of early stuff that I released under my own name, a couple of EPs, they were sort of quite dream poppy, quite sort of filmic sounding, and yeah. And then there's my album with Kramer, which is where the Vicky song is on. Let It Come Down is the project name. That's dream pop and lo-fi and sort of yeah, that's very filmic sort of music. And then there's the Mad Professor thing, which is dub, lovers, reggae. So and that's kind of something I wanted to bring into this new album, was that I wanted it to be quite eclectic, because that's kind of been my approach to music making, has been to just try lots of different things, and I like to think it all kind of holds together, because I have the sort of distinctive vocal sound, hopefully, and the writing, so on, sort of pulls it all together and makes it sort of sound right. But the fact that each song is quite different on the album, I hope that sort of ties in with that genre agnostic label. That it was a journalist that called me that, and I just went, yeah, I like that, I'll use that.
Great expression. I really, really like it.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Absolutely.
So you've been in the music industry since you were literally a teenager.
Yeah.
Do you have any great stories you can share? Anything that's not going to get you done for?
Well, no, I was thinking this earlier, and I just, like, it's a tricky one. It's for me, it's interesting where it takes you, and you just got to kind of, yeah, go with the flow, and you end up doing some interesting things, meeting some interesting people. I mean, I ended up at one point being PA to Courtney Love for a short spell, just through my sort of people that I knew. It was Alan McGee actually asked me if I was available to go and help Courtney out, and I ended up sharing a townhouse in Earl's Court with her for a
It must
short
have been
while.
such an experience.
It was bonkers, yeah, totally bonkers. Her life is insane, and she's quite insane. And I mean, there's a lot of stories there that I can't really tell without sort of.
And was this before or after the death of Kurt Cobain?
Oh, much after, yeah,
Right.
much after. It was not long after the film that she did. I've forgotten the title of. That's terrible. It was actually, she was actually in London having meetings with film directors and producers, and that's what she was here for. And I was just, I think she'd got through about 3 PAs that week, and
How long did you last?
I lasted, and I actually got asked back. I got asked back.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't able to do it the time that she asked me back. I was off doing some gigs, so I couldn't do it. But I did get a call, and I was told that I'd done a good job. So hadn't managed to get. I think the girl that answered the door to me in tears when I arrived to take the job on, who I sort of, it was like a relay baton. She came out in tears, and I went
You
in.
take this job, I'm off.
Yeah, it was, and she was upstairs, kind of shouting for this other girl, and I think, although I was probably terrified, I didn't look it, and I think that was kind of intriguing, maybe, and I just kind of styled it out, and just sort of suddenly found myself to be really resourceful in ways I had no idea I could be, like things that she needed at weird times of the day that I just did. I don't know how I did it, but I just did. I phoned people, and it wasn't really like now, you can just app it or whatever. I was like, okay, I really have to be resourceful here. Who do I know who can sort that out at 3 a.m? Whatever notion it was that, whatever thing it was she needed. But yeah, so I guess that's probably one of my music biz stories.
That is a great
Many
story.
others that are appropriate, really.
Yeah. Anything that's not going to get you sued, that's the problem.
Exactly.
So we've got a question here. Do you think that writing a novel would be the same process as composing music? Do you think they're similar processes?
Well, I've never written a novel, but well, you'd be able to say more about.
I've never written music, so I have no idea.
Yeah, it's very much. I guess in terms of having a topic that you want to cover, so the way I've approached this album was probably along the lines of how you would approach writing a novel, I would guess, in that I had specific people that I wanted to write about, so I researched them, and I spent a good chunk of time doing that before I even started thinking about melodies and things like that. So I guess from that point of view, yes. And each song can be like a mini novel. It could be a really wonderful story that takes you on a journey and tells you a lot about a thing. That's what
when you were telling us about the desk, I just thought, gosh, that is such a story as you revealed it. It's wonderful. I could see that kind of becoming a novel. It's just a gorgeous premise for beginning a song. So I guess each song is like a mini novel, isn't it? You're telling a story. All these women that you've written about, you've You've created a world about
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. And that's the beauty of songwriting, isn't it? It's about economy of words and saying a lot with few words, because you don't, on the whole, you get 3 minutes-ish, 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And I do love that. I love the idea of writing a book, and I've had ideas about what I would write a novel about. But the idea of writing that many words is quite intimidating. I don't know that I've got that in me.
Because I find the opposite. I can write 90,000 words, that's great, but get me to write a postcard and I'm completely stumped. I can't just put everything on this one piece of card. This is mad.
Yeah, how am I going to fit it all on that little box?
Exactly, impossible. So
Yeah.
you've got children. Would you encourage them? I don't know, are they musical? Would you encourage them into the industry, or would you rather that they didn't follow in your footsteps?
I want them to do whatever it is they want to do and whatever makes them happy and whatever they're good at and so forth. I wouldn't be upset if they were making music. They've seen my journey, so I think they would have the good sense to have a steady job to run alongside their music making. They are musical, but I think I have sort of put them off a wee bit in that or I don't know, they said it was their way to rebel, actually. It was to not stick with piano or whatever. So they're musical in that they both consume lots of music. My youngest plays bass, and the eldest listens to tons and tons of music. And if you ever put her in front of an instrument, she can pick things out. So it's totally in there, but she slightly doesn't. I think at some point she will.
Yeah.
But no, I would never dissuade them from going into it if that's what they really wanted, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been so brilliant having you on today. Thank you. And I can't wait to hear the album when it comes out. Looking forward to hearing the first single from the album as well. So for those of you, just a reminder, Holding Up Half the Sky is Zan's album that's going to be out in 2024. And it's explores the theme of female empowerment and alongside stories of women who've inspired her. So this is going to be a really great album to look out for. I'm just going to tell you all what is coming up in the next few days on Goldster. So Humphrey is back with you on Thursday. He and I are sharing this week, and he's talking to Monique Roffey. She is the author of The Mermaid of Black Conch. She's a writer, a lecturer, professor of contemporary fiction, and a founding member of Writers Rebel, which combats climate change, which is going to be fascinating. And I'm really looking forward to listening to that one. And on Friday, I'm interviewing this author, Alexis Keir, this gorgeous new book, Windward Family. It's his first book. It's a memoir, as the subtitle says, an atlas of love, loss and belonging, beautifully written about a childhood between St. Vincent and the UK. And it's just a really, really beautiful book. And then Humphrey is back next week on Inside Story, talking to Danielle Chibilski, I'm sure I've said that wrong, and then Jane Thin. And then on PPG coming up next week, we have, sorry, I've just managed to lose my page here. We have got Humphrey is talking to Tracy Walder next week, and then Rosie Stancer is back with a fellow explorer, Carolyn Mellis, on the 25th of April. And just to say that my guest on PPG next month will be Stu Hennigan. He's a social campaigner and the author of a new book called Ghost Signs, Poverty and the Pandemic. So thank you all so much for coming along. You'll see Humphrey on Thursday and me on Friday. Zan, it's been an absolute joy to have you back on here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you performing again. I hope that when you're gigging, you will make it all around the country so that everybody can see you.
Thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
Take care, everybody. And Zan and I will turn off our videos now, but we will see you all soon. Bye.